Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Wednesday morning to you all. Hope you guys are getting up and feeling awesome out there this morning, having a great start to your day. We're halfway through it, halfway through the week, so we're getting there, getting to that weekend. Got you a big update this morning talking about what's going to happen weather-wise for today. It could get quite active across portions of the plains. We got kind of more so a conditional threat across maybe the central to southern plains, but once you get into, I guess you would say, maybe closer to the Midwest areas like Iowa, things like that, even Nebraska, you're certainly going to have more of an elevated severe weather threat today with a tornado threat. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how these storms can get going and get a little bit more on the scientific side of things, on the weather side of things, and explain kind of what's going on today. It's a very interesting setup. It has a high boom potential, meaning things could materialize in a much more powerful scenario as far as explosive thunderstorms. And we'll talk about why in this video. We'll break it down, try to, one of my goals in these videos is try to explain things where the general audience can understand. And I try to do the best I can at that because I would want somebody to do that for me also. So we're going to try to do that in this video. And then we'll take a peek at what's coming up the rest of the work week as we're expecting another couple of days of severe weather. Even take a look at a system that could bring some rainy conditions at least, for some people, the entire weekend, or at least one day out of two for this coming weekend. And then we'll briefly go over some new information about the cooler temperatures coming. So enjoy the warm weather for the eastern U.S. because there is going to be a cool down for a lot of people coming up this weekend and then through next week. And it could pretty much kill the severe weather threat maybe for the rest of the month. But, of course, I don't ever like to go, 7 to 10 days out past that range because that's very unreliable territory. But, there's a lot of indication showing once we get past this week, we might be done with any significant severe weather for maybe the rest of the month. But, things could change with that. But with that being said, if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. I appreciate the prayers last night with the soccer game. We didn't win. We lost 4-5, but man, it was a competitive ball game, a lot of ties, and it was fun. It was really fun for both teams. It was just a high energy, totally different feel to the game than last weekend. And I took a lot of you folks' advice. I actually said some of the things to my teammates that some of you guys added in the comments, and appreciate the love, appreciate the advice. And it definitely helped me to look at things a little bit more in a different perspective. So that's what we do here. We look out for one another. We're family type atmosphere. So I appreciate that. But 3 minutes in, if you guys got anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put those in the comments below. Let's get rolling. Water vapor loop, the leftover energy from last night's storms is still carrying on through portions of the Midwest, Iowa, things like that. We got nothing too severe, but there is some lightning and thunder out there and just some rainy conditions. So this is what's left over of a low pressure. It will continue to kind of weaken. And then another surface low at the surface will develop and kind of go across western Kansas and then drift into Nebraska. This will initiate, some storms into this region right here. I wish I had my clicker up, but I don't. I do apologize. But right in here, we'll initiate some storms. There will be some energy for some storms down here in Oklahoma and southern portions of Kansas, but it's a conditional threat because you don't have a lot of forcing. You got a cap in the atmosphere we've been talking about over the last couple of days. We talk about that a lot in the severe weather season, where you have a ton of energy in the atmosphere, but it just cannot get fully tapped into because there's just a limiting factor in the upper levels of the atmosphere of warm, dry, stable air that prevents these updrafts from really rising past this area. So that'll be the case down here, but up here, that will not be a case where you will have what we call a triple point that gets met, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So the atmosphere will clear out in the middle of the country, and we will have the chance for some pretty explosive storms across this area. The rest of the country, warm weather, really warm weather. There's some areas that there will be a boundary where there'll be some cooler weather, but watches and warnings, it got kind of dangerous in Virginia yesterday where some really dry air, really low dew points mixed in with some temperatures that were relatively warm. There was some wildfires in Virginia yesterday. We're going to run that risk in New Jersey today too, and I wouldn't be surprised if they reissue some red flag warnings in Virginia again. But a fire can be a real big deal in spring where Believe it or not, a lot of times in spring it's feast and famine. There's a lot of areas that continue to get rain, and then there's a lot of areas that continue to miss on the rain. It's kind of just these kind of train-like patterns where certain conditions roll over the same areas over and over again, and that's certainly been the case this spring, where New Mexico, areas of the western plain states certainly are getting kind of gypped with the rain and getting strong winds and dry air with it. If you're on that left side of that dry line, that's the dry side, and you stay dry. And in this case, that's setting up right in the middle. But winter storm watch is up for northern and northeast Minnesota, expecting some more snow in the northern portions of the U.S., literally bordering the Canadian-U.S. line. Freeze warnings up for the Ohio Valley and areas of the Great Lakes region. Storm Prediction Center today, slight risk. We'll see if this upgrades to an enhanced risk. I'm making this video as of 6:41 Eastern Time, 5:41 Central Time. So just remember, the day of these events, they like to upgrade it or update it to an upgraded scenario about 2 hours after I drop this video. So if they put an enhanced risk, I would say it favors near this triple point right into here. But right now, slight risk of severe storms, level 2 out of 5. Tornado risk will be the highest, where you have the best overlapping dynamics. Where the best kinematics and the thermodynamics overlap, they're saying that's where the tornado threat will be. But guys, I really think they'll shift this a little further north, where the triple point is, where you have your best surface cape, best cape that's kind of in that surface, literally where you're standing, to about 9 to 10,000 foot range, where all that available convective energy is sitting. Right where you have that triple point, that's where you can have a tornado threat. We call it 3 km cape, and it's never that high, but man, where you have just a couple hundred joules per kilogram of that is when you can have your elevated tornado threat. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But 5% risk of a tornado in this region of Kansas, and right where Missouri, Nebraska, and then far southwest Iowa meet. 5% risk of a tornado within 25 miles in any given location. 15% risk of damaging winds in this entire region right into here that you see. And then hail. There will be a chance of large hail. You got a hatch region of hail in this black outlined area. I know it's kind of overlapped by the yellow, but basically where the black dashes are going through, that is a not just a 15% chance of hail pushing 1 inch of diameter. You also have a 10% risk of significant hail pushing 2 inch in diameter or larger. So some of these storms could produce, I would say, golf ball to baseball size hail today. Any storms that get going could produce some big time hail today. So just keep that in mind. But just remember, once you get down here in Oklahoma, you might not get even a storm today. It's just a very conditional threat. So let's go on and break it down. Let's talk about everybody else too. And I have a timestamp for you folks in the plains. But the southeast today, not a whole lot to speak on. Very nice weather, very warm weather. You got any of your pools that you got ready, they're going to start to warm up today, where temperatures widespread in the 80s, deep into the 80s for some people. But you take it out to this evening, to the overnight, not a drop of rain, nothing. Maybe an isolated shower you might be waking up to tomorrow morning in Florida. Northeast, some snow flurries flying around in northern sections of New York State, maybe Vermont, New Hampshire. A little bit later throughout the day, these could drift into Maine, redevelop, where you still had that pesky spin up in Canada. It's still spinning and wrapping some moisture back south on the southern end of this into the interior areas of the Northeast. And so, in those higher elevations, few thousand feet up, some of these rain showers will actually be snow showers. Certainly possible in northern Vermont and New Hampshire. And these will drift a little bit into Maine and just develop in Maine throughout the day. And then some moisture from the Great Lakes region in the middle of the night will cross over southern Ontario, make its way into New York State, maybe even northern sections of PA, and you'll probably wake up to some showery kind of conditions in the Finger Lakes area, the southern tier of New York State, Buffalo, Syracuse, maybe Binghamton, places like that. That's for tomorrow morning, not this morning. The south central U.S., and when we're going to talk about the severe weather threats in the north central U.S. panel, but the south central U.S., Just some rain showers down here in southern and south central Texas. Not a big deal. They might kind of can redevelop here in eastern Texas. But here's that surface low that's developing. It's about to skirt across western Kansas and out ahead of it. Powerful storms you see right here. We'll talk about that here in a second. But that's the surface low that's going to kick up strong winds in the panhandle of Oklahoma and Texas, even far southwest Kansas today, where you got high wind warnings and just dry conditions. But speaking of the severe weather threat in Oklahoma and Kansas, you notice, I mean, at this point, we're about 9 p.m. in the evening, 10 p.m. here, but you back it up an hour in Central Time. And remember, you got this slight risk of severe storms that stretch all the way down to here. But where are the storm development? There's nothing. So that's just one model of the HRRR model. After we get deep into the morning, there's no point looking at model guidance. It's the day of the event. And you just look at real-time observations. How is the atmosphere reacting to the dynamics, in the atmosphere? So, but I can tell you the latest long-range HRRR model does not show much in the way of any development and the slight risk. But we'll certainly watch, and I do think some big-time storms will get going here in northeast Kansas and northern Kansas a little bit later tonight, like after midnight. Could have a large hail damaging wind threat that might develop. All right, so let's talk about the north central U.S. A lot going on. You got this weakening low pressure this morning, and this is what's bringing all the rain up here. In fact, we'll look at the radar right now out of La Crosse, Wisconsin. And we do actually have a severe thunderstorm warning that's producing some smaller hail, some dime-sized hail, which is kind of bigger here. But some hail down here. It was producing a lot of hail in Des Moines this morning, a lot of reports. And this storm is not in view. I only have the radar out of La Crosse pulled up. But a lot of rain, things like that down here. In fact, we can go down here and look at the Des Moines radar and see what this storm looks like. Yeah, and I mean, it's a little storm. It's weakened since. I don't have this in motion. But you can already see if you zone out, what's left over of all this energy right into here is beginning to move on out, move northeast. And we watch to see as a triple point is met somewhere in here, okay? We watch to see how the atmosphere recovers into here, and it certainly will. Well, temperatures will rise well into the 80s, and I think this will be the area we watch a little bit later today for storms to really get going. But let's look at a broader look at things because there's other things going on besides severe weather. Some of this moisture will change to a wintry mix in northern Wisconsin, maybe even a little snow, but if it does mix, it's going to be kind of weird. It can mix back and forth from rain to snow, maybe some sleet is possible up here. So don't be surprised if you get a wintry mix in northern Wisconsin a little bit later this morning to the UP of Michigan, a little bit later this afternoon. A little just area of heavy rain, maybe some sleet, maybe a little bit of bursts of snow. And then as this clears out, big storms will develop very quickly. A triple point gets met, and we'll talk about that here in a second. And big storms develop really quickly, and doesn't show much storm development down here in Kansas, but it does up here in Iowa. And bang, you got a supercell mode late in the evening. Well, not late in the evening, about 6, 7 p.m. Quickly develops, then they'll turn into more of a linear mode where you lose the tornadic threat and it develops more into a large hail, more so damaging wind threat, sweeps across the state of Iowa. And we'll watch for this. And then, you could get a big-time round of snow that blasts through northern and northeast Minnesota a little bit later tonight into the wee hours of the morning. And then this develops into, a decent late April snow event for northern Minnesota. And then areas, even a lot of snow into North Dakota. But we're getting well into tomorrow at this point. But a little bit closer look, and unfortunately, I would love to just get a zoomed in look down here, but I can't. But how these storms could get going today, I'm really watching down here in Nebraska and eastern Iowa. So even though you have that tornado risk that extends into Nebraska, there's not much storm development showing on the HRRR model. That does not mean, and I don't have, I'm at Kansas. I don't have a lot of Kansas and Missouri pulled up on this, but the latest HRRR model does not like the idea of a lot of storms developing down here. Even if you look at the latest, let's look at the latest run. Okay, it does show a little bit more development, a little bit further south, but in general, big storms up here in Iowa. But just because you see big storms, that doesn't mean you got tornadoes, guys. You're likely lacking an atmosphere up here in far northwest Iowa. But let's go on and just go back to the 06Z run. So we'll back it up. So we'll start this off. Okay, I'm going to try to look at my map. Omaha sitting right around this region right here. Sioux Falls, Sioux City right up here. And I think areas like Sioux City could get some big storms today, but they might be a little bit too north, and they're lacking thermodynamics. But we'll zoom in here. Watch out Lincoln, even down there to Topeka, and everybody in between, guys. I would say the Red Oak area, Nebraska City, just right, right here in this region, right into here. Maybe just south of Omaha, right to the far northwest corner of Missouri, far northeast corner of Nebraska, and then southwest and western Iowa. If I've been saying eastern Iowa, I do apologize. I mix my directionals up a little bit. But bang, storms really fire up around 6, 7 p.m. They get quite powerful potentially around dinner time, 7, 8 p.m. And even though you got a big storm showing up here, is the atmosphere supportive for, yes, you can get large hail, but is it supportive for tornadoes? Okay, large hail definitely supporting that, because you got a lot of more cold air aloft up here, but low pressure is down here. But any of these storms, especially on the southern end of these storms that do form, will have a chance to produce a tornado. I would argue down here on these storms right here in southwest Iowa have the biggest chance. And if any storms get going right into this region, a little bit further south, then I think they have even higher of a chance to produce a tornado. And then this quickly goes to kind of a linear threats. And maybe some more storms fire up again. And I hate them kind of jipping. I'm going to actually go down into, let's go down into Nebraska. I'm doing this stuff on the fly a little bit this morning, guys. And here you go. You back this up a little bit, and still not a great view. It just irritates me how there's not like a region for this area right into here. Let's see what Missouri looks like. I'm just trying to help you guys out a little bit this morning. Missouri, shows a pretty good rim, but right here, this is Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska. If any storms can get kind of going in this little corner where all these states attach, that's where your highest tornado threat is going to be, right into here. And you look at the updraft velocity swath for this, okay, it likes the idea of anything that getting going here is going to be rotating, okay? That's why you got that 5% risk of a tornado right here in this corner, right here where Missouri, like I said, northwest Missouri, eastern and southeastern Nebraska, southwest Iowa, and then northeast Kansas kind of all meet right into here. This is a strong signal for some rotating updrafts right in here. So if you live in this community down here, there's not a lot of bigger towns or bigger cities in this region, Omaha being up here. But if you live in this area right in here, this is where you're going to have the highest chance of a tornado. And I do think we could get a tornado here, especially if any storm development gets going right in here. I really do think there's a good chance of a tornado or two from getting going. They could be strong. It just, when a triple point is met, when you have as much surface cape showing up in this setup, anything that can get going could potentially be powerful. So we'll watch out for this. The Storm Prediction Center, as of now, is keeping things kind of on the low end, but I would watch this region right here. And, you go up into Iowa, and, here's a better look. I should have had this up. But it wants to show this one spinning big time up here in northwest Iowa. But I don't know. But it likes the idea of a lot of storms rotating. But that doesn't mean there's going to be a tornado on the ground in Iowa and all these other states I just mentioned. But it really tells you the idea of the triple point, okay? And speaking of the triple point, the best way to show it, in my opinion, is looking at CAPE. Now, sometimes dew points are a good way to show it too, but in this case, there's not a huge cutoff in dew points. So this is mixed layer CAPE. Excellent thing to look at when trying to figure out how much fuel's in the atmosphere. So we're all the way at about 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m. This is right around where a triple point's being met, somewhere here in far eastern Nebraska, western Iowa. You see the huge cutoff right here from Cape values well over 2,500 joules per kilogram to almost nothing here in northwest Iowa. And that's what I was saying. You know, in Iowa, you got this big gnarly storm showing up in northwest Iowa, but you have absolutely no real cape to the atmosphere. Your cape is a thermodynamic, and you're lacking that. Down here, you do, okay? You got a ton of rocket fuel. You got cape values showing up 3,000 joules per kilogram. I mean, even here in southwest Iowa, a lot of fuel to the atmosphere. Okay, and then it quickly weakens. But this is where your triple point's met. Your triple point is basically where you have your best thermodynamics. You can add kinematics, your best forcing, and your best moisture. Moisture is a thermodynamic, so you include that in that more broad term. But your best moisture, your best forcing, and your best kinematic atmosphere. But basically, it's where three main factors meet. That's kinematics, thermodynamics, and forcing. Forcing is huge because if you don't have forcing, you can have all this other stuff, but you're going to be lacking storm development. But normally when you have a lot of kinematics, you have a lot of forcing. In this case, you don't have a lot of kinematics, meaning kinematic is that favorable spin in the atmosphere. Okay, so a lot of cape builds into this region. But what about that 0 to 3 kilometer cape range? Okay, that's between literally where you're standing at the surface to about 9,000 to 10,000 feet up. This is never going to be high. If you ever see this like 1,000 joules per kilogram, then you're probably going to have a end of the world kind of scenario with tornadoes. I laugh it off because it's not, you don't see it. But I'll stop it here. This is around 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is where I'm concerned. But you know, we got to watch here. Let's go on and just bump it up one more right here. This is, you know, just east of Omaha, northeast of Omaha. It wants to show kind of right in this area. There's a lot of small towns and communities, basically between Des Moines, which is more so right in here, in Omaha, but a little bit further up. And keep in mind, you can have 10, 20 joules per kilogram in cape at this surface level and still get tornadoes. But it's a good thing to look at in these kind of situations. But, I mean, you got these values showing up at around over 100 joules per kilogram in that 3 km cape, okay? So that, to me, shows that if any storms do get going, which some of these short-range models are showing they will, there is some surface cape more at the surface, some fuel right at the surface for these storms to get going. And with not any kind of real cap, they will immediately take advantage of this cape in the lower levels of the atmosphere, okay? And then you keep going, and yeah, you got to watch out for this, okay? And you look at a sounding right here in far western Iowa, and you know, you got to immediately you see, hey, a tornado sounding. But looping hodographs right in here, big time veering with height, because you're right here at that triple point. You're right where you have a substantial directional wind shift in the atmosphere, basically where you got a low pressure coming up. You got cooler air to the north, cooler, drier air to the north, and you got winds surging from the south. So these winds are doing a substantial shift from the lower levels of the atmosphere, and you don't even have to go very far up, and they're shifting from basically, it looks like they're shifting from kind of the southeast, from the south, and then southwest once you get about 10,000 feet up in the air, and then more so just flat out from the southwest. So southwest, west. But I'm probably getting too deep into this. I don't want to blow anybody's mind, but basically you got changing direction with height, which is a spin to the atmosphere. It's spinning further you get up. Big dry air punch aloft. This to me screams a lot of large hail potential. Surface temperature sitting at 75 degrees. Definitely supportive for severe weather. Dew points, you could probably work with that a little bit better, but dew points around 63 degrees. But let's just hope this doesn't materialize. We've already had some really nasty tornadoes and you know, in Iowa this year. But certainly some fuel in the atmosphere right at the surface. So we certainly need to pay attention to this. And basically all the available cape from this range points south. You don't want this to get high in this region right into here. Okay. So we'll watch this today, but kind of a sneaky, kind of could be an uptrend kind of scenario with a tornado threat today for sure. So just please be careful with this. Hopefully I didn't get too deep on that with you guys. Hopefully you understand, but I know it's tough. I'm always learning a little bit more with severe weather. If there was one area of weather that I feel the least comfortable talking about, it is severe weather, because I don't like just jumping on here and showing you where storms are going to be. I also like explaining the dynamics to go into it. But between now and the rest of the work week, guys, you could pick up several inches of snow in far northern Minnesota and North Dakota. So I just want to throw that out there. This is coming. Getting close to May. It's pretty wild, but hey, here we are. Temperatures today, pretty warm. There's a big time gradient though. So basically Chicago could stay chilly, but if you work an hour south of the city, it might be in the 80s. Okay, pretty wild stuff. All of the Midwest, except northern portions of Iowa, all the Midwest, all the Ohio Valley, the Mid-South, Deep South, South Central U.S., Southeast is going to be very warm today. But the Northeast, you're staying chilly. Basically from northern PA, points northeast, 40s, even some 30s for highs are possible in these higher hills and elevation in Northeast. So you're going to remain cold today, unfortunately, for you folks in most of the Northeast. Severe weather risk for tomorrow. I was thinking that tomorrow was going to be the bigger severe weather risk. Not sure if I think that anymore, but slight risk, which expands all the way from central Texas all the way up to the Boot Heel and southeast sections of Missouri. This does go right through Arkansas and a portion of northwest Louisiana. We'll talk more on this tonight. Not a very high tornado threat, 2% risk, but there is an elevated hatched risk of hail in areas of Texas. We'll talk about this tonight. I won't leave you guys hanging tonight, I promise. And then also, we're watching the severe weather risk for Friday down here. We'll talk more on that tonight also. I'm watching a system a lot of people have asked me about this weekend. I am watching a system. We'll start this off early Friday afternoon that could sweep through, deliver a rainy day, or a stormy day. We've already talked about how Friday could have severe weather down here. But this could bring some severe weather down here. But we'll see what it does for our Saturday. But this low pressure kind of scooting across, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a severe weather threat that gets introduced somewhere in the eastern U.S. for Saturday. We'll watch what happens. There's a lot of cool, dry air trailing fast behind this. But I certainly think it's possible to get a lot of rain in certain areas of the eastern U.S. Saturday. It's just trying to iron out the details of this. But I do think the further south you go, like some of the models were showing this low pressure cutting a lot further south, which would mean more of a washout, more messy, nasty weather a little bit further southeast. But some of the models have trended more north with the low, which means not as much of a washout, maybe for the southeast at least, with this. Cooler weather's coming. I do think 6 to 10 day temperature outlook. This could moderate a little bit, but for now, below average temperatures expected through the rest of April after these next warm few days here in the eastern U.S. But that's all I got. Did not expect this to go 30 minutes long, but here we are. God bless all y'all. Have a great day, and I'll be with y'all this evening.